This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today is a 2 times TEDx speaker, including the 28th most popular in 2021, an international best-selling author of over 60 books, a certified stakeholder-centered coach, and an executive coach at Marshall Goldsmith's 100 Coaches. After interviewing 500 thought leaders on credibility, he published a 7-country international best-selling book, delivered a powerful TEDx on humanity, created courses, and created the Credibility Nation membership community to help those live, learn, and surround themselves with others on the credibility journey. Please welcome global credibility expert, Mitchell Levy.
Michael, thank you. Well, now, Titan. No one's ever called me a Titan. I don't think I'm going to accept that title, but thank you for having me on the show.
Well, I don't think you could turn it down. I mean, after reading your bio and all the different things that you've done in your experience so far in life, you're a Titan, man. I mean, you're living out in Silicon Valley. You're working on consulting with really large businesses. You're on stages. You're
actually, you know what? I take it back. So here's the cool part. If you're listening to this audience and you're an entrepreneur, I'm sitting at my desk, so I went to Google. If you're at your phone, you bring up a browser and you say definition of Titan. So I'm going to read it. A person or thing of very great strength, intellect, or importance. So maybe one of those things will work, but I feel more comfortable versus the definition I thought Titan was. So Michael, this is one of the fun things in life is we often don't communicate with each other, even if we're speaking the same language, because we don't have a common understanding of the language, right? So now that I've read the definition of Titan and how you explain me, I'll say, okay, thank you, I'm honored.
I love that. You're right, because definitions are very, very important, and understanding what things mean. Because we talk about this too with expectations, right? It's like, I might think that I'm providing the best value to you on something, but if I don't know your expectations, I might not be providing any value to you. So it's kind of very similar in terms of that. But yeah, you've done some incredible things. You're still doing incredible things. I love the other thing about what you're doing is you've also adapted to the changing social media environment. Someone like you who has written books and done courses and done all these great things could just say, what, I don't need TikTok. But you said, what? TikTok is hot and TikTok is what's popular. I'm going to get on TikTok and I'm going to be there. And so I think that adaptation is tremendous. I really would like to start because there's so much that you've done already and that you're continuing to do. And I think that we're going to lead into that. And I think that this intro about you, about all these different parts of your life is stuff that we're going to unpack as we go along. So stick with me in this journey, everyone, and stick with Mitchell here in this journey. I'd like to just go back into time for a second, ground you a little bit in this Titan mindset, ground you a little bit, and learn a little bit about who are you. Where'd you come from? How did you get to Silicon Valley? If you could share a little bit about your background with us, about your journey through life and what got you to maybe your first stage.
So I'm going to say yes, and I'll start that. And for somebody who's listening, why would you want to listen? So let me give you that too. So my primary focus is on credibility, and it's, although that's not the words Michael uses on his website and in the videos that he has to introduce himself, that's what he's talking about: authenticity, integrity, saying, having the intent and commitment to do the right thing. So throughout the interview, you'll learn different nuggets that helped me on my journey. Towards the end, what I want to be able to do is have you understand this is something you could do yourself. This is places you could learn, places you can go. We have definitely tools, assets, approaches, either self-help, as you mentioned, through the Credibility Nation community, or I've got the Ultimate Credibility Bootcamp, or even upcoming, depending on when you're listening to this. We do a monthly webinar. One of the next ones is using ChatGPT in your business. Now, let me say that again: using ChatGPT credibly in your business. Anyhow, tongue twister. All right, so go back. Let's see, who am I? Born on the East Coast, spent my younger days, and don't remember many of them, in elementary, high school in New Jersey. And we were poor, right? We were single mom, 3 kids, school teacher salary. So we were at or below the poverty line, and I never knew it, right? Because mom was cool. Mom, we did stuff that as kids was amazing. I can't remember exactly, but I'll say Tuesdays might have been hot dogs, and Wednesdays were sloppy joes. And, but it was consistent, and kids like this level of consistency. We could look forward to our Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday meals. And those were the days when I have a son now who's 25, and I couldn't imagine when he was 10, 11, 12, doing what my mom did, which was, see you when the sun goes down so you could have dinner, and have completely no idea what I was doing and where I was going, right? That complete no idea. So as I've been thinking about it, and one of the things you mentioned is, your desire to do a TEDx. Part of the benefit of doing a TEDx is it forces you to come up with true stories, come up with an idea worth sharing, not a marketing idea worth sharing. I believe that most of my life, I was following other people's cookie cutter approaches and delivering marketing ideas worth sharing, right? And that's what we're trained to do our entire life. And for me, as I was putting together the first TEDx, and I've done 2 so far, and both of them have unraveled, not necessarily on purpose, but they've unraveled my ability to answer this question for you right now. And I would say the first time I was thinking about the word integrity was around the time when my parents got divorced and I was 9. And Dad was, and most of the time I just call him bio dad because he wasn't really my father. But Dad was the type of person who he didn't know either. My parents were young, and tried to do the helicopter like weekend thing as a dad for a little bit. And so integrity to me was like, what's a father and what's their responsibility? Because and I was an angry kid because I don't think he was living up to that expectation, and I didn't know how to vocalize it as we would often say as an adult, or in a nice way, so I did it through anger. The second time on integrity, and I didn't really know. So I've always been this guy when I started businesses and things I was doing. I'm going to finish this and then come back to like how I got to Silicon Valley. I've always been this guy that one of my taglines early on in my life was say what you do and do what you say. Right? Because so many people do that, right? Or actually, so many people don't do that. They say what they do and they don't do what they say. And that's the classic definition of integrity. I ended up with, my mom got remarried, and the her third marriage was the person who I would call dad. And he died a couple years ago of brain cancer. An amazing man. That said, I never really had a male mentor growing up. And so when I graduated from B school, so I went to college, undergrad, I went to University of Miami. I and then I went to graduate school. I went to the College of William and Mary. And actually, it's a good story of University of Miami. So I'm going to put that here. If we come back to that, let me know. Okay. So when I graduated from the College of William and Mary, I ended up doing work with. Now I take that back. I'm going to do the story.
I'm happy that you're going to go to the Miami story, because I got to tell you, I actually made a little note here, University of Miami, because of the pause that you took when you said it. I could just tell that there was something there that you want to share. And
there's a good story there.
I'm excited to hear it.
I would say when I think about when my life started, there's glimpses of when I was young. But I think my life started when I entered college, like my awake life. I think I might have been sleeping or, sleepwalking in my younger days. And University of Miami is a lot of people there. At the time, it was known as a party school. Some people may still call it that today. It's a beautiful location, beautiful people. And I ended up in my first semester making friends with two beautiful women, which, man, if we had social media today, I probably could find a yearbook somewhere and maybe find them. And I made friends with them. And what they thought was fun on a Friday night was going to the library. And so because I hung out with them, I ended up doing really well in school. And it was just the fact that was important to them, became important to me. And my first semester, I ended up getting 2 Bs and the rest A's. My high school work were C's, maybe D's, maybe B's. Don't know if I could even draw the letter for an A, in high school. And I ended up the second semester, I got 1 B, the rest A's. And then for the rest of my college career was all A's. And so I was active in ultimate frisbee in I think the first 2 years of school. I was on this, did the student council stuff at school, and it turned out when I graduated, I believe there was about 3,000 people in the business school. Maybe there's a little bit more, I don't know, but because there were so many, they didn't walk everyone across stage. And the dean picked one person to accept the diploma for the business school. And because I had 3 Bs, that meant I wasn't the valedictorian. And normally the valedictorian is picked, and he picked me instead. And because it was sort of maybe the well-rounded thing, right? I don't know exactly. And it was fun. I really had a great time there. And I think it was, what I'm going to say is, I was open for the serendipitous moment of meeting somebody who brought me to a certain area, who brought me in a certain way. And this was these two women. And if I should probably spend time and really try to track them down, because their effect on my life has been pretty profound. And so I went to Europe for the summer, spent 2 months there. One of the fun times I remember it was actually 2.5 months. Got a URL pass. And I remember having visited like 16 countries or 15 countries and being, I think, in Amsterdam at the train station and say, what's next? And then having a choice of going anywhere. And that freedom was super powerful. Got back, got home. And when I got home, Mom said something to me. Now, this was before cell phones, right? So, imagine if you're a parent and you don't know where your kid is for typically. I might have called once or twice, but very expensive. You don't know where your kid is for 2.5 months, right? That's like, can't imagine that in today's world, right? So, so when I physically got home, she showed me a letter I had in the mail from the College of William and Mary. the letter was a half a tuition fellowship. Now I already accepted to get had a full, I think it was a full tuition fellowship at the University of Miami, 1 year of school, but it was a working one. I had to actually work 15 hours a week or something, which, by the way, in retrospect, wouldn't have been a bad thing. But for me, the idea of work and school didn't play well. And so on the drive down from, I think my parents were living in Philadelphia at the time, so we drove from Philadelphia to Miami and stopped at the College of William and Mary along the way, which is in Williamsburg, Virginia. And it's a beautiful campus. Now, one of the problems is, and I'm going to offend every Virginian, if you're not born in Virginia at the time and didn't want to stay in Virginia, you were considered an outsider. And if you're an outsider, you just don't fit in. That is opposite from University of Miami, melting pot. Like, you just fit in because you're there, right? And so it was beautiful campus. Drove to University of Miami, checked into the dorms, and I said, I should call the dean from College of William and Mary and just tell him what happened. And so I called him up and I said, hey, listen, I you gave me this half tuition fellowship, drove by the campus, loved it. I'm actually checked in the University of Miami, but you offered a half tuition fellowship. I never responded. Is this still open? So he said, hey, give me a minute or two. Came back and he said, yeah, Mitchell, not only is it open, but we want to make it a full tuition fellowship. And yeah, this is me negotiating, at 22-ish. I go, that's interesting. That's amazing. So, the problem is I only have a year to do at University of Miami and then I get to life, and you have 2 years. Is there anything you could do about that? And he said, I'll take a semester off. And so I ended up saying yes. And, so a year and a half to go there. And so that I ended up checking out of and unwinding University of Miami for the MBA and going into the College of William and Mary. And it was interesting. So, by the way, a mistake, a very interesting mistake. The difference between undergraduate and grad school. In undergrad, the answer is always in the back of the book. As a matter of fact, 40% of what you're gonna get on your final exam, the professor typically tells you in the first day of class. Just think about it for a second. You're a university professor. You're excited about who you are, what you do. If you still love teaching, you're gonna talk about all the things you're gonna learn in class. Well, if you take copious notes, I seem to be one of the only ones who did that. The teacher gave 40% of what's going to be on the final exam in that first session. Okay. So then you go to the College of William and Mary MBA program, and what they need to teach you is the answers never in the back of the book. And so I happened to, in my first semester, be in the same classroom with first years and second years. And that caused a little bit of tension because it took me a little while to figure out that there isn't really an answer in the back of the book. One of the people who ended up becoming a male mentor for me was a professor there. And I talk about him in my first TEDx. And he ended up having a theory about stock market investing. And one day, I think it was 2 a.m. using I think it was SPSS or SAS, I can't remember. I came up and validated his theory. And that's a different story of like the details of all that stuff. But he was excited. 2 weeks later, I had started writing the paper. I go into his office and I go, hey, I'm excited about being published. I started writing, here's what it looks like. And I go, are you interested? We got to do this together. Where do you want to do it? He goes, oh, no, we're not going to publish. Like disappointed right away. And he goes, I took that research. I brought it over to Colonial Mutual Fund, and I got a job deploying that. And I'd like you to come with me. So subsequently, that's how I got to Boston. What was interesting is he turned out to be hedonistic, narcissistic, and taught me all these yucky things about how to deal with people and how to do teamwork. And so first male mentor was not, I guess you could technically say the first male mentor was my dad. And that was some negative things like what really integrity should be. And then the second one, my college professor turned boss, who just all about him and your employees are servants to you. And yeah, it gave me a lot of really bad. I realized that it took me 36 years to unlearn all the lessons. Now, I didn't learn that until the second TEDx. And that was a great opportunity for me to learn. And so I ended up in Boston. I only spent a year with my boss before I went to State Street Bank. At State Street, one of the things I was just reminded of is I created the first South African free mutual fund. This is when there was still apartheid. And it was around that time I ended up meeting somebody. And we'll just say I met somebody super cool who 2 months after I met her ended up moving to California. And 6 months after that, I ended up following her. And 35 years later is today. And we've been happily married for 33 years or 30. Yeah, so 36 years later is today. Right. And so that's what brought me to Silicon Valley, is that my girlfriend, although technically she didn't want to be boyfriend girlfriend because she was leaving in a couple months, my girlfriend moved to California, and it surprisingly, she moved 15 minutes. California's a pretty big state. She moved 15 minutes away from my parents, who had moved from Philadelphia. So my mom's third husband, but the person I call dad, and my mom, they were 15 minutes away. And so even without meeting my girlfriend and now wife, they loved her because she's the reason that brought me to California. And I ended up finding a job with a startup firm because I thought, hey, listen, I'm going to Silicon Valley. The streets are paved with gold. I just have to go to any startup and it's going to be great. And I realized that not all startups, as a matter of fact, most startups don't make it. And if you look at a business model, if in this particular firm, the 3 tenets of the business model, only one was realistic, the other 2 weren't realistic at all. So they lasted for about a year, and then I went to my parents for advice. I like, what do I do? And they great advice. I go to a big company. If you go to a big company, as you move around to different divisions, you'll get to meet a lot of people. So I got to really create a great network. I was at Sun Microsystems for 9 years. I was able to create a great network. And I was able to find what I really fell into and loved. Right. So when I left Sun, I was running the e-commerce component of Sun's supply chain, which was $3.5 billion. And it was during the .com days. And so I will stop at the start of the entrepreneurial side of me. Was 1997 is when I became a entrepreneur. You're looking at my garage, and been working out of my garage since 2000, and that's where I've started a ton of companies and had a lot of fun.
I want to just make sure that people can get a visualization of your garage, because this podcast is mostly audio, not video. Although you can find it on YouTube if you are listening, by the way. But he has you would never know it was a garage. In fact, you would think it's the living room of most houses, with this wood panel cabinetry behind him, and these really cool statues and mirrored, I guess, wardrobe closets of sorts, and a beautiful desk, and all of his fedoras and books behind him. So this is not.
I'm not gonna say all of my fedoras and books, although my books are in some of those cabinets, because I've run 4 different book publishing
Yep.
companies. We published over 750 books. So behind the cabinets are some of the inventory.
Yeah, I mean, so this is not your typical garage, everybody. Let's just make this clear. What's cool is that while we're in your garage, it's not, what's cool is that while we're in your garage is we don't realize it's a garage. So is the floor a concrete floor, or did you also make a wood night? Oh, it is a concrete floor, so that's wild.
No. I'm shaking my head. Great
Oh.
question. You're the first person ever to ask that question. So what happened during the .com days? I'm going to answer that question.
I
The
love
answer,
it.
no, it's not concrete. It was. It's got it. It's harder to
Tell us
pull my
the
camera around
.com
to see.
days. Don't worry, keep going.
But it was. It's got plush green carpeting, and they had to even out the floor. What ended up happening is, when I left Sun Microsystems, I started out by saying, "Hey, I'm going to be this strategic consultant helping companies deploy e-commerce in their business." Now, this was before IBM spent $1 billion changing the name from e-commerce to e-business. So what I was talking about was what we call today e-business. Actually, and today we call it normal, right? But at the time, companies were not recognizing that the internet was going to be transformational.
Right.
As a matter of fact, as I'm going around, I was that guy that went to CEOs of VP of Ops, just talking about the transformational nature of the internet. I was physically walked out of the offices of 2 companies because, and for those that are on radio, I'm going to put my double fingers, my double quotes up,
air quotes,
because the internet's just a fad, right? So one of the things I ended up, for those that have been around long enough, there's a conference called Comdex. It was the largest IT conference in the world, in Vegas, at the time. It was replaced. It was bigger than CES. It's now been replaced by CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, as the biggest, and Comdex went away. So I ran 4 conferences for Comdex. I was running 4 different executive business programs for Silicon Valley universities during that time. But there was the one I created was called the e-commerce management program. And it was learning how to incorporate the internet into your business. 3 months training, $5,000. We ended up having people from around the world fly into Silicon Valley and spend time with us so they could learn this new technology. And there was a company that wanted me to essentially do executive coaching with executives, a firm from Japan. And they go, "Hey, Mitchell, we'd like to have you take somebody probably between 4 to 5 months. We want you to teach them how to think outside the box and have them go through your program." And so I won't actually say the specific numbers, but when I went to my wife and I said, "Hey, honey, I'd like to charge this amount," she laughed. And because of her laughter, for some odd reason, when I went to quote it, I quoted almost double. And the client said yes so fast, I realized I left money on the table.
Wow.
So this was towards this was in the 2000 timeframe. And I do have an interesting entrepreneurial story that I will mention regarding the San Jose State University. So I'll put that plug in the ground. And so what was interesting is I then, it's around 2000, and we actually were having construction done for the house, having the house, and it was perfect timing. It was just about the time we were planning. And I said, "Hey, you know what? We don't really have a good office to put that person. But if you'd like to pay for it, I'll build an office and they could come in and use it." And so what you're looking at, for those who see it, this was $12,000 in what a client paid for to put in wooden cabinets, wooden desks, even out the floor, and it's been a couple years since the year 2000. I've been using it ever since.
That is, you talk about being an entrepreneur, right? I mean, isn't that the entrepreneurial spirit to say, hey, look, if you'll pay for it, we'll do it. I mean, and I also love that you brought the number to your wife and she chuckled at it. I'm interested in that chuckle. Was it a chuckle of that's too low or that's crazy high? And what are you thinking?
Oh, the latter.
Right.
She thought I was out of my mind.
It's incredible though, right? Because so I'm going to speak to the speaking business and the coaching business and a lot of services that don't have a specific price model. So just to kind of make a good contrast here, my insurance company, we have insurance rates, and it's very clear. So it's a service industry. We offer a service of meeting with our clients and quoting and doing an insurance program and everything. But we have rates that we go by. So we don't set the price. We just have the rates. Whereas our service industry that we're talking about here in terms of public speaking and coaching and all that, there's no set rate. You can have a coach that goes out and says, I'll charge you $30 an hour. You could have a coach that goes out and says, I'm going to charge you $700 an hour. There's no set rates, but it's really what you believe you're worth based off of your value and based off of your experience. And then that's wonderful, right? It's like, that's all good. But, and I really want you to riff on this, Mitchell, because there's that piece. Okay, good. That puts you in a bracket. But then there's what can I actually ask for, which is what you did in that meeting of, all right, she chuckled at that number, but I'm going to go double.
And by the way, I still undercharged apparently.
Right. And so there's a mindset shift that happens there that I would love for you to share with everybody about that mindset of saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to go double, and I still undercharged.
And by the way, I will say to you that $700 an hour is low for the coaches that I hang around with.
Mm. Wow.
So just so you could increase your number next time, right? So because it's not about time, right? Here's what you got to think about is what impact. So for me now as an executive coach, what impact can I have with the person I'm working with? And does it matter if that impact comes in minutes or hours, or, the bigger the person you're working with, the lesser amount of time they have. So fine tuning, something that may generate millions, tens of millions, billions. Hey, if you're coaching somebody and you put an extra $1 billion on the bottom line with a very simple idea that most people have, but for some odd reason, this person may not have thought about, well, what's that worth? Right. So you have to ignore the craziness. It's really the value that you get. Mm. For me, when I work with somebody, I've got this really cool foundation of credibility that I end up building, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And it's the person I'm working with realizes that I'm not there for me. I'm there for them. And if I'm there for them, is to encourage them for them to be there for themselves. And that's a really interesting model, because when you dial that in and they see it, something happens, something really magical happens. And so in terms of what are you worth in terms of your energy, it's not about, I don't know, at the end of the day, it's not about dollars. It depends on, the value and the perception of that value. During the .com days, early on, sharing information was valuable. Hey, I have some information. Let me tell you about it. Here's some ideas. Here's what you can do. Let me tell you about it. In today's world, information is almost ubiquitous, right? So going out, telling people how to do stuff is really not relevant. To me, the most relevant stuff is showing people how to do stuff, or doing things with people where you get to learn new things, or opening up an opportunity, seeing where two industries belong together that weren't together before. So it's actually much more active. Just sharing information isn't as relevant these days, right? It's It's for your particular case, you just created a sales mastery course. So it's not just, hey, this is cool. Let me mastery the mindset of sales. It's actually going out, targeting the right audience, helping to walk people through, and then helping them afterwards make it happen. That's where the real value is. What's that worth? Well, in one industry, it's worth a certain amount. In another industry, it's worth a significantly different amount. So it's worth what, because the salespeople, the ASP and the commission rates and the 1099s of every salesperson is different in each industry. So depending on the average of the industry you're in, you charge a different amount.
Right. Yeah, I really like that too. And I like how you talk about fine tuning the process for the different executives. I think we forget too on how valuable time is. And so we think that by offering more of our time, that's going to be a value to them. In other words, saying, hey, we're going to meet 3 times a week, an hour every session. So therefore 3 hours a week. And quite honestly, to your point, these CEOs, 3 hours a week, they're going, wait a second, where am I finding 3 hours a week? I need to meet with you for half an hour a week at the tops, and you need to be able to help me with my business. So it's I love that about fine tuning this skill. Is that, some entrepreneurs, we're going to sit some time and we're going to brainstorm. We're going to talk about things. We're going to listen to your things. We're going to work through different scenarios together. But there are certain entrepreneurs who are moving at the speed of light, and they need to just say, here's what's on my mind. Let's try to figure this out. And that fine tuning comes in and really, really moves them forward. And you've done this countless amount of times. You started 20 businesses in Silicon Valley, and I'm sure that number has grown since this bio was written here about you. And I'm very interested in this starting of businesses. I'm interested in the how you were able to get that momentum started, and how you were able to leave them in a place to where they were profitable, or even if they weren't, but leave them in a place where at least you felt comfortable.
That's a great question. So I'll give you a story. I was thinking I should go back and tell you the San Jose State story, but that'll be one of the businesses. So let's talk about that. So when I first started back in 1997, I had advice from a friend who said, hey, Mitchell, in order to make sure you maintain your credibility, you have to do 3 things, or at least one of the 3 things. You need to publicly speak. You need to be at a university teaching, and you need to write a book. And so you got to do at least one of those 3 things, because that's a base case for, whoever you are going forward. And of course, I'm an overachiever. I've done all 3, and I've written over 65 books and published over 750. So I definitely took that one to a new level. So I was teaching at San Jose State in their professional development. At the time, they were paying $110 an hour, which was actually good money, but my consulting rate was significantly more, and I had run out of time. So when it's time for me to move on, here's what I often do. I never quit. I always say, hey, listen, not that I had the time, but I said, I have to do more, or I'm going to have to do less. Right. So the dean goes, Mitchell, why don't you create a professional development program for us? I didn't expect that. I'm like, oh, because, listen, you're an entrepreneur. You got to listen. If somebody says, here's a need, you got to listen. So what I'm really good at is going, all right, let me think about that. Let's get back to you. By the way, this is where the salesperson comes in. Let's put a time on the calendar 3 weeks from now. So I had time on the calendar, right? 3 weeks later, I come into the room and I go, here's what we're doing. I'm going to create a program called the e-commerce management program. We're going to start off in 9 months from now. So that is the fall term. That's typically when you start stuff. That sounds right to you? He goes, yeah, that sounds right. I go, I'm going to start with 30 courses. Here's the outline of the courses and what we're doing. And I've already lined up a bunch of people to speak. I will help them speak well. I'll pay them. And here's the thing. I don't want you to pay me anything. But I know you've been paying me in the past. I just want 25% of the door. So Dean came back and goes, yeah, listen, we need to pay just for liability reasons. We'll pay the teachers directly. And laughed at me because nobody ever created a program that was successful enough that he was just thinking, no, I don't have to pay. You're going to build a program. I don't have to pay you. No problem. And, we took in over $2 million of revenue. And then of course, because teachers are not really, God, I shouldn't say this, but most academics who are full-time academics, they're there and they don't really have a good handle of real life. And so the thing that's interesting is he was very unhappy paying me $500,000 and never even thought once that he wouldn't have $1.5 million if it wasn't because of me. Right. It's kind of just an interesting thing. So that's, sometimes by the way, that's a different series of issues you have to deal with, right? People who feel entitled because of who they are and what they do. So the program was amazing. And what I realized is there was such a need in society that we just needed to have structure. And I ended up having, if you think about any event, I'll put it into 4 different categories. So anything we do in life, you've got the person who's the bank who funds it, your financial advisor. You've got the person who focuses on logistics. How do you make sure everything happens? You have the person who focuses on marketing. And then you have the person who focuses on content. So a generic model for me, Michael, is when I'm working with somebody, if one of the 2 parties is grabbing 2 of the things and the other party is grabbing the other 2 things, then we have a 50-50 split and we create a product. So most of the companies I'm working with, there's somebody who I loved and I go, hey, we should co-create a product together. We co-created a product and we picked up our first client. So I'm just going to have the audience think about for a second before I answer it. When do you think we do the first contract? So what I want you to think about is the time we do the first contract is after we finished working with our first client. Like, huh? Well, listen, here's where so many entrepreneurs just fall on their face. They spend so much time talking about what the theoretical world would be and how to structure things and how to work with somebody else. And let's pay money for lawyers to have this ironclad contract in place. And, you may never find a client. Or if you have a client, you may decide you don't like doing this, or you may decide you don't like working with the person you're working with. Right. So guess what happens? Any client deployment, at some point in time, the stuff is going to hit the fan. You've got to recognize that the person you want to work with is somebody who answers the questions in the room to the client when they're screaming and yelling in the same way you would when you're not in the room. That's the person I want to continue working with. And so typically a new business is one in which I find somebody who we got to really do this together. Let's try it. In some cases, we do stuff. We never acquired the first client, never had a contract, didn't need to. That's not a business. The business is the point in time. It's technically after the contract's in place and you got your 2nd, 3rd, 4th client. That's when you got a business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually love that you just said that. I actually have experienced that in the past. And I think that that's what holds up a lot of businesses and entrepreneurs And you highlighted that in that they spend so much time spinning their wheels, and forget about even the expenses of accountants and lawyers and everything, but just the time that is spent spinning the wheels of, well, who's getting this share, who's getting that share, how does this look, how does that look, what's my cut, what's your cut, we got to outline this, we got to outline that. And by going through that process, and I've been through that process multiple times, at the end of it, we're going, do we even, well, the nice part about this is sometimes you figure out if you even want to work with the person. That's one of the nice, I will say that's one of the benefits of doing that. But at the end of it, if it is somebody you want to work with, you spent a lot of time putting something together. And then here's the next part. And I think you kind of talked about this too, is, well, one of the things you said is you don't find a client. All right, you got nothing. But then you find a client and everything goes out the window because it doesn't even meet the criteria to the structure. And so you spun your wheels for a lot. And I didn't think about it the other way that you just mentioned there. So I'm really happy you brought that up of, hey, you know what? Why don't you figure out if you want to work together first? Put some time together, start working on the business a little bit, get a client, and then you could start structuring. I really like that. I think it's a really great way. It's kind of like goes into, I've brought this up on the show before, of messy action, of just kind of, let's just take action. Let's just see what this looks like, and then we'll figure it out from there. And like, look, if we don't see eye to eye on it, then we part ways and we keep moving. And I really, really like that. And I think that speaks to why you were able to start so many businesses. The other thing I like that you brought up in there is co-creators. More often or so often, we find entrepreneurs, I'll say I'm one of them right now, where it's by myself. I started Den 10 by myself. I'm owner operator running it. Michael Esposito Inc. I'm by myself. I'm owner operator running it. I have a lot of people who play a big, huge role in helping me in the creation and in all of it, but I don't have co-creators. And I think in the co-creator, there's so much collaboration happening. There's so many great things happening that it kind of relieves you as the solo business owner, as the entrepreneur, of some of the stresses. You have somebody to lean on. It relieves you of some of the duties that maybe you're not strong at. There are some things, there's certainly a lot of things I'm not strong at. Operations, logistics is one of them. And it would be nice to have a co-creator who actually can pick up the slack there. So another really great tip that you brought up there in terms of starting a business is if you can find a co-creator who can complement your weaknesses and you can complement their weaknesses, then obviously you can start a ton of businesses, which I think is just tremendous. So you were called Mr. E-commerce, and I think I figured out why you were called Mr. E-commerce. I'm interested in your book business. Another great place for us to talk about. And for me, I'm an aspiring author. I talk about this very frequently in the podcast. I'm sure most of my audience is going, Michael, you've been talking about it. When are you going to freaking do it already? And a lot of it is prioritization. So I always talk about it here because I'm like, I'm going to do it. I know I am. And when it comes out, I expect every one of you listeners to go out and buy a book. But let's talk about you and your publishing businesses and the books that you've written. What has been your process in writing books, in getting started? And, why don't you take it from there?
Such an open-ended question. So I know where I'm going to go. So let's talk about what I'll do. I'll give you a little bit of context of who I am, what I've done as a publisher, how it relates to what I do with credibility. And then Michael, we'll talk to you about the title of your book.
Cool.
And just so you could see the experience, right?
Love it.
And then more importantly, as we're talking about the title of your book, that's not relevant until we know what you're going to use the book for.
I love this. So we'll be doing a little hands-on work together. So listeners, you could play along, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. All the processes that you and I, Michael, you and I will do together is relevant for the audience.
Cool.
Right. So the first, just so you have context, I've got 4 different publishing companies, started in 2005. And we have published over 750 books. Personally, I've written, I think it's actually 65, but I have to count every now and then. And the model that we have now, so let me tell you who we're attracted to. business professionals wanting book credibility. 5 words, business professionals wanting book credibility. That's who we're attracted to. We're looking for that business professional who's successful. They know what they're doing. They know what they deliver. So it could be a product or a service, and they're interested in using the book for more speaking gigs, more consulting gigs, more product sales. That's a good fit for us. Right? We don't want to do the memoirs unless it's part of what's going to help them do more speaking gigs, do more product sales, right? So essentially what we're talking about is the person who's doing the book as the door opener, as many people call it the business card, but it's the door opener that opens the door for the next leg of what they're doing. For instance, if sales and the sales mindset's the right thing for you, that's what the book's focused on, right? So just a thought. And the thing that's interesting is at this stage, book publishing is democratized. I mean, everything about book publishing is available for anyone to do, right? So, Michael, if today you wanted to create a book, the easiest way to do is start asking a bunch of questions from ChatGPT and have ChatGPT help you publish a book. Go to any one of the self-publishing platforms and put it out there, and then you got your book. It's simple, it's just time, right? For us, let me tell you what I do, which is different. Is when I work with the author that I work with, typically what will happen is I'll make a promise. My promise is 6 months from today, we will have an asset, which is in essence your core purpose. So the name of the asset will be focused around who you are and how you want to show up in the world. And you'll have the title of your book, which is showing your core purpose. You'll be an international best-selling author in 6 months. And the amount of time that I need to extract from you is 10 hours over that 6-month period. Doesn't mean you can't spend more. But if you give us 10 hours, we can deliver. And my team will spend 310 hours. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're always making that decision of time and money, right? If you've got a lot of time and not a lot of money, you do it yourself. If all of a sudden you've got so many things in your life and lots of money is available or enough money is available, then you're using that money to buy time. So you can actually buy time, put time in your life. Now, I often look at people and they go, I got to write this book. I've always wanted to write it. And I'm like, great, please do. That's a hobby. So you want to separate anything that's not a book that's being used to help you close more business in the future is a hobby. Now, potentially sometimes people have hobbies that make money, right? But in today's world, as a business person, you do a book for one or two reasons. It's going to be something that's going to help you close more business in the future, or it's a hobby. And it's really okay to spend time writing book because it's a hobby, right? And so once again, if you have money and you don't really have the time and you have the money, that's a good prospect for us. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, and we're going to jump a little bit fast forward into what I do, credibility. We'll back into what that is later. I'm going to ask you the term I like to use, and I've done this now with over 1,000 people, is I want people to articulate the who and the what. So who they serve and what pain point they deliver or what pleasure point they deliver. I want people to articulate their purpose in 10 words or less. Mm-hmm. And so when I'll do a fast forward, we could do a little bit more later. I interviewed 500 thought leaders on credibility, and 98% cannot articulate who they serve and how they serve them in 10 words or less, even after being prepared, knowing they're going to get that question. So Michael, let's talk about you for a little bit. This concept I have, it's called a CPOP, your customer point of possibilities. And it's in essence in 10 words or less. What is that area? What is that focus for you? I mentioned regarding books, I mentioned 5 words: business professionals wanting book credibility. So it typically starts with who you serve. And then what is it that your either pleasure point or pain point. When I look at myself as executive coach, and then executive coach is an interesting word. It's both coaching and I've got a consulting piece of it. The perfect client I'm attracted to, CEOs who don't fly like eagles. Right. So I'm putting a pain point in there because if I just say the pleasure point, you look at my websites at the moment, it says CEOs who fly like eagles. I like that. I like thinking positively, but that doesn't attract those people who don't yet. What do you mean I don't fly like an eagle? Tell me about that. And then I can go into more detail talking about who I am, what I do, what we'll do for the company. Right. CEOs who don't yet fly like eagles. Right. So for you, Michael, who do you serve? Who is that audience? And you've got a couple of businesses, right? You got the insurance business and you have the speaking, podcasting, but who's your audience?
Yeah. And I would say, thank you for that question, by the way. So, let me just make a few things clear for our listeners here and also for you. So we have Den 10 Insurance Services, and that audience is very clear, right? That audience is people who need insurance. It's people who own a home, people who own a car, own a business, have a family, and need insurance for those things. So that's pretty simple, and that's not what we're talking about here. But for Michael Esposito, Inc., it's not as simple. Michael Esposito, Inc. has, as you just mentioned, we have the podcast, we have the speaking business, we have the coaching business. So it varies depending on the audience, but what you did touch on is the Sales Mindset Mastery program that we just put out. And that one is pretty specific, and so we could stay there. And that one is where I do believe it meets the criteria of everything that you just brought up in what you just said about your publishing company. And so in that criteria, what we're looking at of the people that we serve are, I would call them executives, leaders, and so let's stay with executives and leaders. They could be in sales, but really anybody who's client facing, right? So we'll keep it to client facing, who are flying below the radar. And you said who are, you're talking about CEOs who aren't flying with the other eagles. And that's essentially what flying below the radar means for me, is that, they were hired because someone saw some really great potential in them. Someone saw them as an eagle. Someone saw them as somebody who can really create an impact in their company. And yet 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years later, they are hiding from management. They are doing just what's expected so that nobody sees them. That's when we say flying below the radar, that's what we're saying here, or that's what I'm speaking to, is you're making sure that you're doing just enough to not get fired, just enough to keep your paycheck, but you are doing also just enough to not be seen, and where management might come in and say, hey, we need a meeting. We need to talk about this account. What's going on here? You just want to just cruise.
Fascinating.
So that would be the ideal clientele. Got
it. Have you closed a lot of business with that yet or not yet?
Well, I wouldn't say a lot of business, but what I would say is that I would bring the whole Michael Esposito, Inc. into this, in that I would say that we speak to aspiring leaders. I would think that our audience here are probably a good mix of leaders already, of entrepreneurs and business leaders and executives who are looking to scale, which is wonderful, and they're on their path up. And that's why I say this is kind of like very challenging to do the entire Michael Esposito, Inc. business. But to your question, I would say that we have a ton of leaders who are looking to scale, and that's why they're listening to this show. And then we have those who are aspiring, who are in a stage where they're like, I don't know yet what I want to do. I'm not sure if I want to take the leap. I'm not sure about this promotion. And they're in that position. And so therefore, I do get clients in terms of coaching clients where we go through those models together of where are you right now and where do you want to go? And then let's try to figure out the path for you together. So I find that. Then on the on the workshop side of the business is working again with, in this part, it's working with business leaders who are in the financial industry, more specifically, and working with the leadership team on being able to refine their skills, their public speaking skills and presentation skills, in order for them to present to management, in order for them to present to clients and future clients of everything that they have going on. So I would say yes, but not as specific to what the Sales Mindset Mastery course is.
Fascinating. All right. By the way, it's very cool. I'm glad you said that. And I'll say we will continue our conversation and see what we might be able to co-create together.
Oh, cool. Love it.
So
this is like a fun coaching podcast episode here that we're having.
This is fun. So if you're seeing me and you're just listening, what I do when I'm in thinking mode is my eyes go to the top of my head, because I'm a visual thinker, so I'm visualizing a whole lot of opportunity in different ways, and so let's create a common language for a second. In today's world, I think this was always true, but we were somehow taught this was not true. In today's world, everyone's a leader. So whether or not you're leading other people or you're leading your own life, you have a choice to lead your life the way you want to. Right? Nobody's an aspiring leader. You just are a leader. You make choices. That's you leading you. Just common language. Everyone's a salesperson. From the time you were born and you started crying to each step along the way, you're selling. Right? We somehow have denoted that word to be a negative word, but you're selling, right? And the other thing is we're always looking for that magic answer, that magic formula, right? And a lot of times we're taught a magic formula by someone we actually trust, know, love. We're taught that magic formula from potentially our parents, our grandparents, our bosses. And we're taught something that I'm going to say may not always be credible, but it works. So you're taught to do it. Right. I know it's not really, this is what people say. I know that's not really in line with your integrity, but if you do it, you're going to close business and make more money. Now, some people say yes to that. Some people don't. Right. As long as it's in the insurance field, as long as you're just don't tell them that part. They don't need to know about it. Right. And it's out of integrity for some people. Right. But if your boss tells you it's okay, maybe you think it's okay. Right. So what we're often doing in life is we're looking for the Jack and the Beanstalk bean. We're looking for that magic formula. So basically, we're leaders. We're all leaders in who we are. We all have to sell. We all have to market. By the way, we're all marketers as well. And in your example of what client-facing leaders do, you're talking about the fact that they do just enough. Well, just enough isn't going to be just enough, right? That's another way of saying quiet quitting, right? Yeah. Doing just enough is quiet quitting, right? And then everyone wants to ensure success, whether that's with the I or the E, right? So what's interesting to me is I want to give you one that works for everything. I'm going to put it in chat as well, and then I'll share it. And obviously, I got something else already in chat. I'll do this other one. There's a link to an upcoming webinar I'm doing. I'll put that in chat too. But here's kind of what I'm thinking about for you. It's the audience you serve is client-facing leaders. Now, if you have an MLM and you're just starting in your multi-leader, it's not yours even. You just decided to join somebody's MLM. You fit. You're a client-facing leader. You've made a decision that this is how you want to do work going forward to make money. That's okay. That's borrowing somebody else's models and formulas. If you're the CEO of the company, you're a client-facing leader. If you're not, you don't have a company, right? So the interesting part for me, and I just wanted to play around with the E/I, client-facing leaders ensuring success. I think that covers everything, because what happens when you get a CPOP, think about this as the who and the what. Who do you serve? Client-facing leaders. What do they want? Either what pain point do they want to satisfy, or what pleasure point can you help bring them to? And depending if it's the E or the I, it's a little bit more pain point or pleasure point. But that covers all the products you have.
Yeah.
Kind of an interesting twist on words.
Yeah. And so when you're saying insuring versus ensuring, right?
Yeah. Insuring versus insuring, with the I ensuring, or insuring with the EN ensuring.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting on how that can play out.
So what's fascinating to me is we have to think about how to say it, how to do that. But to tell me more, when I said who you were and you put yourself in buckets, that's the tell me more. Somebody says, hey, that's interesting. So what I want to say is, I'll step back for a second. If we take a look at the world today and what we've been taught 4 formulas that all have a credibility flaw in them. We've been taught Simon Sinek's why. We've been taught the value proposition. We've been taught the USP, the unique selling proposition. We've been taught the 30-second pitch. All 4 of those formulas have a inherent credibility flaw. Should I ask you what it is, or do you want me to?
I'm waiting for you to tell me. Go ahead.
They all start with the word either I or we. It's about you. Even when somebody says, who are you? They're not actually asking you who you are. They're truly, what they mean to ask is, who are you in relation to me, and how can you help me? What can you do to help me? That's what they're asking, even though they say, who are you? Right? Because that's what's in it for me. We know that. What's in it for me? So credibility has 10 values associated. The definition, it's the quality of people trusting, knowing, not knowing of, but actually knowing you, trusting, knowing, and liking you. And one of the core elements, one of those core values, is being a servant leader. So if you're credible, who do you serve? Because you're a servant leader. And as a servant leader, are you addressing a pain point or a pleasure point? And that's when somebody walks up to you and say, okay, like you could imagine some really grumpy old guy come up, who are you and how can you help me?
Right.
Answer them. Right. I'm attracted to client-facing leaders ensuring success. Right. When you know who they are, you could use the E for ensuring or the I for ensuring and make different things. Right. Let's say you're doing the I for ensuring. Right. Hey, listen, I got a couple of parts of my business. One is helping people understand the fundamental thing that we all need to do, and that's to sell. Got a sales mastery program, and I teach financial professionals how to actually show up better in their space, so that as a client-facing person, they are better at who they are and what they do. And on the client side, there's so much insurance that we need in so many different ways. And I don't oversell, I don't undersell. I just help my client understand what they need to insure with the I, who they are, and how they make sure that they're set and they have a good place in life. Right? That's your tell me more. Now, you don't memorize. Here's what's interesting. When you know your CPOP, it's the frequency of the words that represent you. When you're saying you're telling me more, you don't have to memorize that. You just need to know your frequency. What words represent you? Everything you said, Michael, was client-facing leaders ensuring success. Everything you said was all about that. Right? That's your frequency. right? And by the way, I can't tell you that. You have to feel it. You have to wake up in the morning and go, oh my God, that's it, right? If that's it, you now have a North Star. Your North Star allows you to make decisions and demonstrate behavior that's in alignment with your North Star. If you could take those decisions and behavior and share them both synchronously and asynchronously, what you do in person and what you do in your social media presence, in your when you're not in the room, your podcast, everything else you do, if you can do that, then you show up in the world credibly with authenticity, with clarity of messaging, with all the things that is what you do as well, but with all the things that are important for people to go, hey, I want to work with Michael Esposito.
I love that you said too, and I think this is such great wisdom, words of wisdom for our audience to hear, is that it's your frequency. And just going to elaborate on that very quickly for everyone. So often, and I'm sure many leaders that you work with and people that I work with, especially in the public speaking space, they get hung up on memorizing those 10 words, as you said, get hung up on memorizing their elevator pitch, their 1-minute pitch, and all those different things, when that's not the key. Those are guidelines, those are frameworks, those are structures in order to help you identify what your frequency is. I love that you use that word frequency, because you say it one time and it's like, oh, that sounds cool, that's awesome. But when you say it 10 times, 20 times, 100 times, 500 times, eventually it doesn't sound awesome anymore. And it's because that frequency has been tuned out. It's been tuned down by you, and it's going to be tuned down by them. So it's all about, like you just said, staying in the integrity of those 10 words, staying into the message of those 10 words, and sharing that with the person that's asking you, and sharing that in your elevator or in your 1-minute pitch. It's that frequency, it's that energy, the vibration, all of that coming out in those 10 words or in that minute. That is what you're talking about, which I love that you just brought up, Mitchell. And that I want everybody to really understand is that when you're giving your pitch, when you're doing your little BNI morning breakfast pitch or whatever it is, recognize the energy that you are bringing, recognize the vibration, the frequency that you are on, because that is what people are walking away with. They're not walking away with the 10 words. Those are wonderful. They're walking away with the energy you brought that helped them realize what those 10 words are.
So, Michael, I'm going to say yes, and I love that. Mostly 100% in sync. The and is simply if you can actually articulate 4 or 5, so it's less, the 10 words or less. If you get customer-facing leaders ensuring success, 5 words, those are all words that come out. And what I want you to think about so that you can keep, if you're doing a BNI thing, here's what's fascinating. And you got 15 seconds or 30 seconds. Start with the first 5 seconds that you want people to remember. That is the, I'll do it in a different way. That's the playground you play in. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes if people are not used to, if at some point in time, people say, what's your CPOP? And then you could just answer it directly. Right? What's your CPOP? Client-facing leaders, ensuring success. For me, CEOs who don't yet fly like eagles. Now, if you've been given 15 or 30 seconds, then you say, oh, let me tell you what that means. Mm-hmm. Right? So what you're thinking about, though, is what's the playground you play in? If somebody's thinking of referring you and you play in a particular playground, so remember in our green room conversation when we first started, I go, when I'm talking to somebody, there are 3 categories. They either are a referral partner, always my first thought process. They're a potential client, or they don't really care. Now, I guess there's 4 categories because there's also this opportunity for a co-creation partner, right? But that's so few, I don't even think about that. Although the last event I went with a goal of coming up with 2 co-creation partners and 2 referral partners. The fact that I may end up having picked up 4 clients is irrelevant. That's not what I went there for. Right. So for you, or anyone who's listening, that the thing that's really fascinating is How can you say something in 5 seconds where people go, hey, I'm interested myself, or I have a friend who's interested, right? Have a friend who's interested, right? Client-facing leaders ensuring success. Let me tell you what that means. And then you give 30 seconds on what you do on allowing people to be sales mastery folks. What you want them to remember, client-facing leaders. I got a client-facing leader who's struggling at the moment. Oh, wait, I got to recommend them to Michael.
And I love this, going to the 5 words and the 10 words and doing that, because we go back to what we were talking about earlier about refining our skills, refining our coaching, refining what we're saying, because, it's like that old statement that was said, and I can't remember if it was Abraham Lincoln or it was one of the past presidents, I believe, that was quoted on saying this, is, I would have written a shorter letter if I had more time. And right, because that means that you've really put the time and effort into it, right?
So now let's go back to your original question. Mitchell, tell me about your book process.
Yeah.
Right? How do you feel about, by the way, client-facing leaders ensuring success? How's that feel for you?
It feels great. I mean, it's like you said, and there's also the and to be able to add to it. So I like it. It's right in line with me and my integrity. So I'm with you so far.
All right. So let's, now that we got there, are you ready?
Yeah.
That's the title of your book.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So what do I do when I work with clients? We do this first. I want to make sure it's in alignment. We won't actually do anything till like tomorrow. When you wake up in the morning, you got to see whether or not that's in alignment with you. By the way, it feels like it's in alignment with you. I want you to, I'm going to talk for a second, then I want you to share it out loud. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think we should just say ensuring success. Mm-hmm. We'll have to figure out how to play with it. Right. So what happens is you and I sit down for an hour and we bang out a table of contents. Kind of simple. I have to tell you, the table of contents and the book itself will work for every product line you have. Even selling insurance, this book will work. Because, there's all these requirements if you're an insurance guy of what you can say and not say. You're not going to say anything about returns or success, or you're just going to turn client-facing leaders, and then I would have the E, ensuring success, right? And then on the book cover itself, you could do a little arrow that points to an I, right? But you don't have to talk about insurance with the I. You just have to talk about how humans can ensure success. It's interesting. So table of contents would be pretty easy.
Kind of reminds me of, I forget his name, but I'm sure you'll know the author and who I'm speaking of, the gentleman who has the book series, No BS Marketing, No BS Time Management, No BS, right? You know who I'm talking about?
I do, but I don't remember the name, so I'm going to Google it.
Yeah, I downloaded a few of his books. Really, really great books, but they're very similar to what you're saying here. I'm following a very similar structure in each of them, to where you're not really... it's kind of like he's got his formula. And
is that the Dan Kennedy stuff?
Yep, that's right. Yep, Dan Kennedy. That's exactly who it is. Okay. He's got his formula, and he's just applied it to all the different genres. Michael Gerber also did that with the what's it called?
The E-Myth guy.
That's right. Yeah. He did it with the E-Myth. He did it for the insurance industry, which obviously I read that one. And he did it for several other industries. And again, following a very similar, like you said, it's a success model. It's a model following the model of success of what did I do right the first time, the second time, the third time, and just kind of replicating that for every industry is what he did. So I can see that happening here. So I love it. This is cool.
So why do you say it? I'm going to just say, what's your CPOP, and just start with client facing, mm-hmm. and don't read it, just feel it. So Michael, what's your CPOP?
Right. So client facing leaders ensuring success.
So for the listeners who are empaths, right? You could feel the energy, and it was just slight. He's still in his head. He's running the program and all this stuff, right? But dude, the hair on my arm stands up when somebody speaks their frequency. And even though it was a little bit more from your head than your heart, I still felt the tingling on my arms.
Mm. Yeah.
Right. Pretty cool stuff.
And I felt the tingling in my arms. I got to tell you too, same thing here. And you know what, probably where you sense from the head too, and is, you know, when we're doing these shows, there is a performance that comes on a little bit. So, you know, looking at the camera and speaking into the mic. And so that kind of, you know, what I want to say to that is, for all of our multitaskers out there, there's no such thing as multitasking. There's no such thing. You are dividing your time between two things or three things or four things. You are not multitasking. So something is losing a bit of energy. And so while you said you could feel the energy, but there was still a little bit of the head, it's because I was dividing my time between that energy that was real and the camera, and focusing on making sure I delivered the message clearly. So, but yeah, I feel it. I love it. It's great.
So here's what's interesting. I feel what we just did together in your show is just some of the most fundamental, basic, and simple things we can do. We're not taught this way. We don't do things this way. It can't be that easy. You can't, you're probably saying to yourself, yeah, I know I'm on the air and I'm recording, but it can't be that easy. Michael, trust me, when you wake up in the morning and you iterate your CPOP and it just pops out, the next decision you make, you now have a new compass to make that decision on.
Mm.
It's really interesting. It will help you with the North Star of your decisions. It will help you with your behavior. It'll help you in terms of, okay, do I need to make an update to my webinar, to my web pages, to my, let me look back at the course. Wait, does this really fit everything that's really me? What next do I need to do? So for me, what's interesting is I could tell you something that I realized, and I know I should have known this forever, but I haven't. So when I finished doing the research of 500 thought leaders on credibility, I ended up with a life purpose. I thought I was doing it to get a book. You know, Napoleon Hill interviewed 500 people, created Think and Grow Rich. Mitchell Levy interviewed 500 thought leaders on credibility. I'm going to do a book. It's actually called Credibility Nation, right? And about 11 months into the 12-month series is when I got my life purpose. And the life purpose is represented in my second TEDx. The TEDx is called We Are Losing Our Humanity, and I'm Tired of Watching It Happen. And that's the one that was the 28th most popular. And the most simple thought process is, if we do nothing more than be humane to each other. And how do we do that? We do it by being credible. Or actually, let me say it the other way. Sorry. If we do nothing more than be credible to each other, we will be more humane to each other. Right? So what's interesting, I got this life purpose. And one of the quotes that came out of life purpose, I wrote it in my book. I think I included it in the TEDx, is credibility is a journey, not a destination. So Michael, you're not going to write the book and life changes. Your book is just one asset of everything else you do. The podcast, just one asset in everything else you do, right? And so although I knew that, although I say that, it was literally about a week or two ago that I realized that I'm still practicing all the marketing cookie cutter stuff that other people have taught me. And that credibility is, I don't want to say, hey, come to me and I'll teach you credibility. I want to say, go to Michael Esposito and you will learn not just how to be sales mastery, but how to have credible sales mastery. Right. So for me, it's credibility needs to be a verb, not a noun. And I need to co-create and co-partner with other people to help deliver. So for instance, I've been playing around with ChatGPT. As a publisher, you got to play around with ChatGPT. As a human, if you're not using, whether or not you want to call it artificial intelligence or computer learning or whatever it is that you want to call it, if you're not using it, It doesn't mean you're going to be replaced. What it does mean is those peers of yours today that are using ChatGPT, they're going to replace you. Right. So I said, hey, this is about 4 or 5 days right before I went on the event I just came back from. I go, yeah, I've got enough of a knowledge. Don't know if I call myself an expert, but I definitely have expertise. I was at a networking group where people had me sit down and I walked 4 people through how to make ChatGPT work for their scenarios. I'm like, okay. So I just put on LinkedIn, you look at my profile or you look for, I'll probably do this once a month. Got a partner of mine by a guy by the name of Lucas Root, and we're going to be doing a 1-hour webinar on using ChatGPT for your business. Credibly using this tool to help you with your business. And then, the goal of that is to get people to bring them in. It's the acquisition. Bring them in, just to have them see who we are and what we do. And then to bring them to the next level. And the thing that I do, Michael, it's the Ultimate Credibility Bootcamp. So now let's apply the Ultimate Credibility Bootcamp to you. Now that you have your CPOP, right? As we have a 1-hour course. Anyone's interested, we have a 1-hour course of how to articulate your CPOP. It's powerful. It's asynchronous. You don't need me in a room for that. Now that you have your CPOP, day 1 of the Ultimate Credibility Bootcamp is how you show up in a room and you just are that. I know that sounds crazy. Most people, when you say, who are you? What do you do? They talk about all the different audiences they talk to, all the things they service. Dude, client-facing leaders, right? The way that's defined, it's client-facing leaders, right? And then they talk about all these different businesses they run. I got this business here and this business here. Client-facing leaders ensuring success, whether it's through insurance that they need for themselves individually, or whether it's learning how best to be better at mastering sales, right? Done. 10 seconds, right? So the day 1 is how do you show up in the room credibly? And day 2 is how do you reinforce that asynchronously, right? If I'm going to recommend an insurance guy, I'm going to recommend you. I'm going to recommend you if when somebody Googles you, you show up credibly. And if somebody Googles you and stuff comes up that doesn't make me feel comfortable, I'm not going to recommend you. And so you got to realize that when you're meeting somebody, and the most important people we meet are referral partners, and you're meeting referral partners, and when they search you, they don't like what they see. They may not tell you, they just won't recommend you. Mm-hmm. So the boot camp basically is a 2-day virtual event where we want people to see you, right? And see you. How do you echo your frequency when you talk, right? And then we want them to be able to feel you when you are not actually in the room. And so that's what the boot camp does. We do that one once a quarter. And the name is exactly ultimatecredibilitybootcamp.com.
Very, very cool. I mean, this has been so far, I want to say, because I'm not trying to give a hook here with the bin but I want to say that so far this has been just really incredible. I mean, going from your life story, your journey that you've gone through, sharing the drops of knowledge there with building businesses and everything. And then, of course, this cool little coaching session that we just did of finding my CPOP. I love it. I love my CPOP, man. You're right, because, that energy, and I just talked about it before, it's so important when you leave the room, right? Because that's where the buzz happens. It's where the people are kind of mentioning your name and saying it. And I had a wonderful PR agent on the show not too long ago, Philomena, who's also a very good friend. And she had such a wonderful way of explaining what she does in the PR world of, when sales is when you're talking about your business. Marketing is when people hear about your business, and PR is when others are talking to each other about your business. And I believe that that's the way that she said it. If not, go back and listen to the episode on Philomena, everyone. But that's also what you're saying here, is that you're creating your own PR is that you create your own PR when you identify your CPOP as you name it and as you coin it. When you identify this, and then you leave that energy in the room to where people now are buzzing about you and are referring business and are learning about you in a credible way. I want to go into this credibility because you talk a lot about credibility on your website. You talk a lot about credibility in your videos and in your content, and I absolutely love it. One of the core values over at Den10, Michael Esposito Inc., in my life is integrity and transparency. And what that means to me is that I'm always showing up as my true self. I'm always showing up as the person I've advertised. And I'm always doing my processes. Anything that comes across my desk, anything that I do always goes through my integrity checkpoints. And so what I mean by that, and by the way, it makes decision-making very easy. It makes decision-making so much easier when that happens, in that if something doesn't feel like it's in my integrity, meaning that I don't feel that it's the right thing to do, then I don't do it. And I'm not talking about being lazy. I'm talking about things that are either legal or not legal, things that are going to hurt somebody or harm somebody or not harm. Yeah, that might be the regulation, but like as you had done in the insurance example, that might be the but can you make believe you don't see that? Well, no, I can't, because that's not acting in my integrity. And if I do it this time, then how am I going to know I'm not going to do it next time? And where does it end, right? So acting within my integrity is very, very important to me. And I'm saying all of this because integrity and credibility, they pretty much are walking hands, skipping down the road. And so I love that you focus on credibility, and I'd love to hear more about what you do in terms of credibility.
Well, let's I want to add to that. So integrity is one. Actually, technically, integrity is 2 of 10 values of credibility. Right. So the thing that's interesting about the words authenticity and integrity is that they don't necessarily imply what's good for society or good for others.
I was actually thinking that while I was saying it all, is that like you could be acting in your integrity as a serial killer, right?
That's it, dude. That's exactly what I was getting at.
That's right, 100%. Right.
And there are firms out there who are saying to companies, "Hey, we're going to help you push your authenticity."
Right. Well, what are you authentically bringing?
Thank you.
Yeah,
so what 2 things came out of the that I wanted to mention. So there are 10 values of credibility, and you could, I've got them everywhere in so many different places. You could reinforce them by looking at the book I created, the TEDx, or I've got them publicly in so many different places. It's credibility is the quality in which you're trusted, known, and liked. And there are 10 unique values with sort of an exception. When I first did the research, that's the reason integrity is so important to you, is it's the only one that came up twice. And so I know the audience can't see this.
Our YouTube audience can see it.
Okay. So the
go to the Michael Esposito Inc. YouTube channel. You'll be able to watch this.
And maybe what you do is you can take a snapshot of that and say, hey, this is Mitchell talking about the values of credibility. So if you look into each of the pillars, trust, know, like. So I'll tell you what I did. I followed a cookie cutter approach. We know the expression know, like, trust, but it's not actually what we do in practice. In practice, the first thing that we do is do we trust this person to be who they say they are? And as we trust somebody, so let's say I stumble upon your website. You've got, when I hit your website, 1, 3, 5 seconds for me to trust that you could do what you do before I want to invest another 30 seconds to get to know you. As I'm getting to know you, I then am building upon the trust and I'm deciding if I like you. So it really is trust, know, like. So what happened is I had this term integrity under the pillar of being trustworthy and also under the pillar of being known. And when I created the book, so first version of the book, when I did the TEDx, I had integrity twice. I just didn't know what it meant. right? And it was about a year after the research, and I'm deploying credibility as best I can in different places. And a woman by the name of Cheryl Lynn, she focuses on joy. She said something really interesting to me. She goes, Mitchell, do you realize that happiness is on the outside and joy is on the inside?
Oh, love that. Happiness
And
is on the outside, joy is on the inside. Love that.
I go, oh, yeah. And I knew that was cool. And when I woke up in the morning, I knew why integrity was in two pieces. There's the external integrity that you show the world. That's under being trustworthy. The internal integrity is as people get to know you better. So a classic example, I was talking to somebody, VP, large company, had a boss who she absolutely adored and loved, and he had amazing external integrity. And they were on a business trip together, and at some point in time, she saw him with another woman at the bar, like a very intimate another woman at the bar.
Right.
Well, that's internal integrity.
Right.
And married, by the way, he was married.
Of course. Yeah.
That's internal integrity. And when you lose internal integrity in the eyes of the people who actually trust you,
right,
you lose external. She couldn't follow him anymore. Right. So we as humans somehow separate out external and internal integrity. It's when you cheat on your taxes, you cheat on your diet, you cheat on your spouse. Like that's integrity. And we somehow think that's okay, but that's your internal integrity. So credibility is really the fundamentally, it's easy for you to see and show how you show up. And under being trustworthy, that's where the authenticity comes from. That's where external integrity, that's where being vulnerable and being coachable is important. Part of this show is I asked you up front is, hey, can we work on you? And you go, yeah, of course. You didn't ask me what we were going to do. You just said, of course. Right? That means that you're vulnerable. That means that you're showing that you're coachable. Right? That's really cool. The under being known, servant leadership is probably the one. Actually, under being trustworthy, I kind of thinking coachability is the most important, but that's just me empirically. I don't have stats on that. When I've done research of my audience, coachability is definitely important. Under being known, it's really servant leadership, right? Now, what we talked about when we talked about being a serial killer, and by the way, you're going to see the hole in this right away. It's the intent and commitment. Those are two values to do the right thing. The whole is, what does the right thing mean? And so that's not truly defined, but I believe it's the right thing by society. Once again, what does that mean? And we're not going to go there because I don't have an answer for it yet. Right. But it's also your internal integrity. And then under being likable, which is really cool. It's very easy to be likable, right? There are two things. Anyone's listening, two things. Share your stage. I call it spreading cred dust. Share your stage, which, by the way, you're doing right now. You're spending money. You're spending time. You're doing it with an inherent value of you learning, but then you're also sharing the people that you engage with. You're sharing your stage. And you're showing respect. And how do you show respect? As anyone who sells anything to anyone, come early, come prepared, come with your heart. Right? You want to be likable. Spread cred dust, show respect. And so credibility is the way I'm deploying. It actually is part of everything I do. I don't do a book unless it's for the right audience, or the right person that I'm working with. Executive coaching is all about, once I understand somebody's purpose, truly understand their purpose, whatever issue, problem, whatever opportunity they want to grab, very easy. Sometimes it's a simple mindset change. Other times it's empowering the people that work for them, their stakeholders, to be actively engaged in what the CEO or exec I'm working with does. On the credibility side, It's finding more partners to play with who want to just bundle in the course that I have to articulate your CPOP. That particular course can be bundled into anyone's programs. Yeah, Michael, I'd love for, before people actually go through the sales mastery, have them take the CPOP course, right? They need to show up as themselves. Like, and it's not because it's Mitchell Levy's, it's just simply, it's what fundamentally came out of the research is if we can articulate when you meet with other people and you feel that they're resonating at their frequency and they could explain it in less than 10 words. Like, it's so easy to know if you want to play with them. It's just simple. The boot camp we have, the Ultimate Credibility Boot Camp, no one else is really doing it this way. There'll be lots of people who copy it, and that's great. I'd love that.
Hold on, but while you're still speaking, because you still got the small bubble, you're still in a small bubble. Just unshare your screen. Awesome. Continue.
Sorry, thank you. Unshared.
Go ahead, keep going.
I completely forgot.
You were just sharing about the boot camp that you're doing.
Yeah. So the boot camp, actually, since we had the bubble going, just for wrong bubble, wrong thing. There we go. The slide I want to share, and this is for those who are listening. I've said it a couple of times, but now let me say it for those who are seeing, it's with a visual. If we have a compass in our life, which represents this framework of who we are and what we do, to me, that's that CPOP. If you have a compass, then when decisions come your way, you're making decisions that are in alignment with that. You're making decisions that are in alignment with your North Star. And as you mentioned, if the North Star is not credible, i.e. you're a serial killer, you're going to make decisions that are in alignment. You're not going to be credible, but at least you have a compass. It's not the right compass, but that's a different show to talk about. The makeup and mind behind serial killers. If you have a compass, if you're making decisions that are in alignment, you are by definition demonstrating behavior that's also in alignment. Right? And so what happens in the boot camp is we're reinforcing that. It's a one-time, it's another word that I'm introducing called CPOPing. CPOPing is the active verb of living, breathing, and being, living in that framework. That is you. Right. So what the boot camp is an instance of CPOPing, and that is over a virtual 2-day period. You're going to learn how best can you be living your framework, your purpose, your North Star when you both talk to people and when you're not in the room. Incredible stuff.
I always love it when I have a guest coming on and it's like I could just hand the mic over. This has just been an incredible process that we've gone through together in this show. And so what I think in the last minutes that we have together, what I'd like to use is a line that I just heard John Maxwell use, which I believe is part of his vocabulary very regularly, but I just heard it, is, can you land this plane for us? Because we've gone through a lot of different ideas and thoughts here, and I really love everything that you've shared. And so there's not one thing that I'm hanging my hat on here, and I actually am using that term because you got your beautiful fedora on. I see it hung on your different slides there, and so I'm very interested in how you might be able to kind of bring this all home for us, of all the different aspects of your journey, of all the different places that you are, and how might you be able to wrap this episode up for us?
So we often hear this concept of the word legacy. And we think of legacy is the building that's named in our name, or the park bench that has our name on it. And that's not legacy. Legacy is the feelings that people get when they engage with you. Legacy is who you are today and how you show up today. We all should be living our legacy today, not tomorrow, not planning for tomorrow, not trying to build something for tomorrow. We should be living our legacy today. If you're living your legacy today, you'll be remembered for that. Just think about when you're gone, what do you want people to say about you? Well, you got to be living that today. And the concept of knowing, articulating, and other people being able to know that frequency, which is you, the CPOP, is probably the most relevant thing you can do. If you want to know a little bit more about CPOPing, come and join us. Come and join us at the Ultimate Credibility Bootcamp. Loving the transformation that happens to people. And then there's other things we can do after that. But it's just ultimatecredibilitybootcamp.com. Would love to see you there. One of the first things we do is encourage you to take the CPOP course. And so most of the time I will give direct feedback, or somebody from the team will, but most of the time I give direct feedback on other people's CPOPs. Because it's still early on in the process that I'm still training my people to take a look at it and figure it out. And at some point in time, I'll create a certification program of certified CPOP specialists.
I love it. I love it. I just really have enjoyed this episode here, and I know that you and I are going to be talking offline and scheduling you for another episode, because you just have so much information and knowledge to share with our audience. And I just ask our audience members, please just put either a comment or a like or something. And I don't typically do this, but I just want to make sure that this is all resonating with them. And maybe for our listeners, what did resonate with you from this episode? Because there was a lot shared here today, and I know Mitchell has listen, written over 65 books. And so we as a community have an opportunity to be able to speak and learn from somebody right now who has a tremendous amount of experience and knowledge. And so I want to make sure that we use our time efficiently, as we've learned in this episode here together, of when we're doing these episodes together, that we might be able to serve you best. So please DM me, shoot me a text, shoot Mitchell a text or a DM if you're listening from his audience, and let us know, what resonated with you in this episode and what would you like to hear more about, because there is without a doubt in my mind, Mitchell, you just say the words if you don't agree with this, but there's not a doubt in my mind that Mitchell's not coming back on the show.
The fun part, if you're listening to this and you go, man, I want to do this live with Mitchell and get my CPOP, we could do that. That'd be a fun show.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. And that's a different show, I will say, because the show that could be possible on, and I'll invite you to this, Mitchell, and everybody to watch and be a part of this, is I do a IG live every single morning. So I go Instagram live. Now, this is New York time. I know you're in California, but I go live every single morning at 8 a.m., and I can make some adjustments in terms of that for you, Mitchell.
I'm thinking 5 a.m. Yeah.
I'm you know what? We'll talk offline, but I want to make sure.
I just came back from the East Coast, so if we had talked before, I would have been okay. So we'll find a time. We'll
figure that out. I would just want our audience to hear this, and that Mitchell's going to, and he just said it right now. So he's going to come on my IG live. So pay attention on Instagram. We'll make sure that we promote it and everybody will know. But he'll come on and we'll do that on the live show there. And you'll be able to join in through the comments. And Mitchell and I will be on there, and we're going to do your CPOP live right there. So that'll be really cool. This has been tremendous having you on. I really, really, I got to tell you, TEDx is certainly somewhere that I believe I'll be able to be on that stage by being in your network and getting to know you better. So I really, really appreciate you coming on, and I'm really excited for the journey that we have ahead of us. And it's in the last couple minutes here, if you want to share for our audience how they might be able to reach out to you, find you on social media, and of course, as always, that'll be in the show notes.
That I always recommend to other people, and I'll do the same thing. My name is Mitchell Levy, so that's 3 L's in there. And just going to mitchelllevy.com is the best site. And then that has links there to everything else. From a social media platform perspective, I spend the most time on LinkedIn. That doesn't mean I'm not playing with other platforms, as you pointed out earlier. And I'm doing that. And not as effective as I do on LinkedIn. And I just learned a lot about TikTok. And so you complimented my TikTok, and I'm just going to say, that's so far from where I wanted to go. So I'm going to be learning and growing that as well. And I appreciate it. So it's mitchelllevy.com, and would love to see you guys. If you end up going to the boot camp as a result of this show, let me know. And I will especially thank Michael for that.
Very, very cool. Well, this has been awesome. Again, appreciate you coming on today. I just want to let everybody know, we talk a lot about networking, and the way that Mitchell and I met was through the 10X stages. We were both judges for the Great American Speak Off. And while we were sitting in the green room, in the judges' room, we were all in there, and I went in just thinking, all right, I'm just here to judge. And next thing I knew, Mitchell was putting out comments, hey, who wants to, do podcasts together? Who wants to network? Who wants to get to know each other? A couple others were in there, and so I want to thank you, Mitchell, for putting it out there. But I immediately jumped on that bandwagon and started texting people in that room. So I just want to share with our audience here is that there's always an opportunity to meet new people and to seize that moment, because you just never know who you're going to meet. Mitchell and I both saw our names on the calendar. We didn't know who each other was quite yet. And then when we looked into each other, we were like, all right, this is going to be a cool episode. And sure enough, this has been a really awesome episode. So thank you, Mitchell. And I hope everybody was able to take.
Thanks for having me and for making this happen. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.